Hi everyone, and welcome to the Modern Research Ethics lecture video. In this video, we're going to discuss the three major guidelines for modern social science research that have arisen as a result of the Nuremberg Code and the Belmont Report. In the previous lecture, we discussed some of the major unethical research studies that help shape our modern research ethics. Today, social science researchers follow three major guidelines: voluntary participation, informed consent, and assessment of risks and benefits. And I want to talk about each of these in turn, starting with voluntary participation. Voluntary participation means that the participant should participate in the study as a result of their own free will. There should be no coercion or pressure to participate. This coercion could come from external sources, like a supervisor or a teacher telling you that you have to participate in the study. Or it could come from internal sources, like when you're providing financial incentives to participants and they want to complete the study because of that incentive. Financial incentives in particular can change the equity of a research study because disadvantaged populations may be more incentivized to participate in research as compared to advantaged populations. For example, if I was interviewing college students and I offered a free meal to participants to participate in my study, that would probably not be seen as coercive. However, if I was doing the same research study, but I offered a meal to homeless individuals, that could potentially be more problematic because participation for a homeless individual could mean the difference between the participant eating or not eating for the day. So the researchers have to carefully consider disadvantaged people in the study and how their recruitment efforts will affect those populations. Of particular concern with voluntary participation is the use of protected classes of people called vulnerable population. Vulnerable subjects are research participants that, due to their specific characteristics, may be at more risk for coercion than other populations. The federal policy for the protection of human subjects lists three groups specifically as vulnerable populations: pregnant women and fetuses, prisoners, and juveniles. Research that uses any of these groups must include special protections because of the vulnerability of their subjects. For example, research using prisoners must go through more extensive review of the recruitment procedures because there's significant concern about subject coercion due to their incarcerated status. If you were on probation and your probation officer asked you to complete a survey, would you feel like you had a choice, or would you feel like your probation sentence was in danger if you refused? Although these three groups are the only ones formally listed in the federal policy for the protections of human subjects, there are a lot of other populations that are considered vulnerable by researchers. These populations include mentally ill and elderly individuals, as well as disadvantaged populations, students, and veterans. All of these groups may lack the capacity to give informed consent or may be more likely to consent based on different circumstances. For example, studies that involve college students may be unethical if they require participation in the research as part of a course. Without an alternative assignment, students either face failing the assignment or participating in the research. So this would not be considered a voluntary choice. Another concern with potentially vulnerable populations is research incentives. Like the previous example of a free meal, the implications for a potential participant's life if they turn down your incentive are different based on the context they're made in. Researchers must provide extra protections for vulnerable populations during subject recruitment to ensure that all participants are participating on a truly voluntary basis. Another important ethical consideration is informed consent. When a participant provides informed consent, it means that the participant understands exactly what being part of a study entails before he or she gives voluntary consent to participate. The diagram here shows you some of the requirements for informed consent. Participants should be informed about the risks and benefits of the study, the nature of the research study itself, the alternatives they have for treatment, and they must be given an opportunity to ask questions. This ensures that experiments like the Tuskegee study cannot occur again because participants will know the truth of the experiment before it starts. Now, there are some situations in which informed consent at the beginning is not possible. For example, psychology experiments often require some form of deception. Milgram's experiment would not have worked if he told the participants what he was researching at the beginning. In the case that informed consent is not possible at the beginning of the study, the researchers must agree to provide participants with as much information as possible without negatively affecting the study, and then they have to agree to debrief the participants directly after the study concludes. During the debriefing, the researchers will explain the actual purpose of the study to the participant, give them a chance to ask questions, and also provide support resources as necessary to ensure that those who suffered emotional or physical harm during the experiment got assistance. Now, the importance of consent is highlighted here with an example from my own research. In order to truly understand what they're agreeing to, consent forms have to be written with the participant's level of education, language development, and other relevant personal characteristics in mind. A research study I did with Dr. Wooldridge included both adult and adolescent participants. To ensure that all juveniles in the study understood what was required for participation, we had to use different language in the consent form for juveniles as compared to the adults. You can see that both wordings reflect the same meaning, but the juvenile form is written at a lower reading level so that juvenile participants can understand exactly what is expected from them. Finally, research must include an assessment of risks versus benefits, and this process corresponds with the concept of beneficence, which is a requirement of the Belmont report discussed previously. Summarized, beneficence means that the researcher should minimize the risks and maximize the benefits. And you can see that from this image here. If you imagine risk on a teeter-totter, you want to ensure that benefits always outweigh the risks. The more inequality between the two sides, the better. At worst, you want the risks to equal the benefits, but you should never conduct a study in which the risks are serious and the benefits are limited. The reason that the assessment of risks and benefits does not require the avoidance of all risk is because sometimes harm to the participant cannot be avoided. Think about medical studies. When you're trying to identify a cure for cancer, you can do all of the pre-study research possible, and you can still end up with a drug treatment that has risks. However, the benefit of curing cancer is really significant. So as long as the risk is minimized for the participant and the participant voluntarily consents to participate after knowing about the potential risks, the assessment process will help reduce the potential for harm. All right, well, that concludes the Modern Research Ethics lecture video. Thanks for watching, everyone.